In January, Apple signed a deal it spent 15 years trying to avoid. Reportedly, $1 billion a year to Google, not for search this time, for Siri's brain. On stage, Apple called it our own models. In the fine print, a 1.2 trillion parameter Gemini running inside Apple's data centers. So which is it? Apple's comeback or the quiet end of Apple's AI independence? It starts with a failure Apple never admitted. Rewind to 2024. Apple announces Apple Intelligence, a smarter Siri, deep personal context, your iPhone finally understanding you. The demos looked incredible. Then, nothing shipped. The new Siri slipped. 2025 came and went. Features were shown, promised, and quietly pushed back, while ChatGPT and Gemini were shipping upgrades every few months. Inside Apple, the AI division was reorganized. Leadership was reshuffled. Key engineers walked out the door, straight into competitors' labs. And the company that builds its own chips, its own operating systems, its own everything, had to bolt ChatGPT onto Siri just to answer basic questions. Think about how strange that is. Apple, the most vertically integrated company on Earth, running its flagship assistant on someone else's brain as a temporary patch. Here's the part Apple never said out loud. Its own models simply weren't good enough. Not close enough to catch up in time. And in Silicon Valley, when you can't build it in time, you buy it, even from your biggest rival. Which brings us to January 12th. January 12th, 2026. Apple and Google publish a joint statement, a multi-year partnership. The next generation of Apple's foundation models will be built on Google's Gemini models and cloud technology. The reported price? Around $1 billion a year. Neither company confirms the number. What they do confirm is bigger than money. Google built Apple a custom Gemini, 1.2 trillion parameters, tuned specifically for Siri and Apple Intelligence. And here's the unusual part. Apple gets the model inside its own data centers, on its own private cloud compute. Apple can even shrink it into smaller models that run directly on your iPhone. No other company gets that from Google. This isn't an API subscription. It's Google's crown jewels, living inside Apple's walls. And Apple had options. Reports say it evaluated OpenAI and Anthropic for this exact job. It tested them all, and picked the one company it's been at war with since Android launched. Now add context. Google already pays Apple roughly $20 billion a year to stay the default search engine on iPhones. Money flowing one way for search, and now, intelligence flowing the other way for AI. The two companies that spent a decade pretending to be rivals just became infrastructure for each other. But that's not the story Apple told on stage. June 8th, WWDC. Apple finally reveals the new Siri, a standalone app now. Full conversations, multi-step tasks, actions across your apps. 2 years late, but real. And the messaging was very careful. Craig Federighi told the audience, privacy and AI is non-negotiable. Apple insisted these are its own foundation models, trained on Apple's data, running on Apple's infrastructure. Refined, they said, using outputs from Gemini's frontier models. Nothing runs on Google's chat infrastructure. Technically, every word of that can be true. But look at what's actually underneath. The architecture is Gemini's. The base intelligence came from Google's labs. The training recipes, the model family, born in Mountain View, raised in Cupertino. It's a bit like buying a car, repainting it, and calling it our own vehicle. You own it, you control it, you even improved it. But you didn't build the engine. For 15 years, Apple's entire identity was, we build the whole thing, that's why you trust us. That sentence now comes with an asterisk. So if Apple gave up independence, what exactly did it get back? Run the scoreboard. Google, massive win. Its search deal already touches 2 billion Apple devices. Now its AI sits underneath Siri too. Google gets paid, gets scale, and gets something priceless. Its biggest rival just publicly admitted Google's AI is better. Apple, a calculated win. It stopped the bleeding. It shipped a Siri that finally works, kept its privacy story intact, and bought itself years to rebuild its own models behind the curtain. Expensive? Yes. Fatal? No. OpenAI? The quiet loser. ChatGPT was Siri's brain transplant in 2024. Now it's been demoted to a fallback for certain questions, while Gemini takes the foundation. Wall Street? Unconvinced. Apple's stock dropped about 2% after the keynote. Analysts called the AI updates lacking. The market saw the same thing you're seeing, A great product built on a rival's engine. And regulators are watching the two biggest gatekeepers in mobile computing get even more financially entangled, on top of a search deal that's already been through antitrust court. Which leaves the real question: what is an iPhone when the intelligence inside it is rented? There are two honest readings of this deal. Reading 1, Masterstroke. AI models are becoming a commodity like chips, like glass. Apple never made its own memory chips either. It buys them and wins on the product. If intelligence is just a component now, let Google burn billions training models while Apple owns the device, the customer, and the privacy story. Reading 2, Surrender. The defining technology of this decade, and Apple couldn't build it. The company that owns everything now depends on its fiercest rival for the one thing that matters most. And dependencies like that have a way of becoming leverage. Ask any company that ever built its business on someone else's platform, the rent always goes up. Masterstroke or surrender. One of these will look obvious in 5 years. I've pinned a poll in the comments, pick a side and defend it. BYTE investigates the power moves behind tech. If that's your kind of story, the next one's already in production.